Across the expanse of time, historical photographs serve as silent witnesses to strange events, whispering cryptic tales of the past. Each image holds a story that captivates the imagination and sparks curiosity. Among these mysteries are the FBI's fingerprint files, which offer a glimpse into hidden truths of bygone eras. Join us as we delve into the depths of history, uncovering secrets and reshaping our understanding of the past. How one hero saved hundreds of pets. In the world of people fighting for animal rights, one person really stands out because of her endless dedication and a dream that seemed almost too big to be true. Camberley Kate fought against the problem of cities not caring enough about animals, which showed our community's darker sides. This person started life in a simple way in Middlesboro in 1895 and later got the nickname Camberley Kate from a lot of people. This cute name doesn't fully tell us how committed Kate Ward was to helping animals. Her whole journey in this cause started when she luckily saved a dog in 1943, a moment that completely changed the direction of her life. Kate's daily life could be a story itself, as she pushed a cart she made with 2 wheels through the complicated streets of the United Kingdom, aiming to save homeless dogs. When she passed away in 1979, she had helped more than 600 dogs, and also some cats. This number is impressive, but it's just a small part of the story of how much Kate was willing to give up for these animals. She did a lot more than just save and take care of them. Her fight was against people not caring, trying to make them see the value of every living being in our cities that are constantly growing and often hurting those without a voice. Kate became a well-known figure where she lived, a reminder to everyone about caring for animals. She did more than provide shelter. She fought for laws to make sure animals were treated better, like making sure dogs were on leashes and had rights. Her work got a lot of attention, even from other countries, because of how much she was doing. People sent her things like food, blankets, and money to help her cause. This shows that even though people can be distant, they still can come together to support a good cause. Kate's work was a lot more than just being nice to animals. It was about challenging how things are and trying to change the way animals are seen and treated. She lived to be 84 years old, and until the very end, she was with the animals she saved, showing the impact she made. Her death wasn't just the end, but a beginning for others to continue helping animals. Her life makes us think about how much one person can do to fix what's broken in society, especially in how we treat animals. It's a critical look at whether the efforts of a few people can really make a big difference in the long run, or if they're just small moments in a bigger story of how people and nature struggle to coexist. Long before the charm of garden gnomes and the variety of decorations that fill our gardens today, the rich folks of the early 1700s found a quite unique way to add character to their lawns. This wasn't about placing an unusual statue or an eye-catching piece of art in the garden. Believe it or not, they used real people. That's right. The wealthy, always on the hunt for something new and exciting, decided to have actual people, called garden hermits, live on their property as part of the outdoor decor. These garden hermits weren't like the gardeners or the staff who tended to the outdoors. They were given places to live like small, made-up hermitages or caves, set up among the ruins or landscapes of the large and fancy properties owned by the era's rich. The job of these hermits was to be living signs of a life spent in solitude and simplicity, blending into the gardens as though they were as much a part of the natural surroundings as the plants and the trees. This role was more than just a unique job. It was a whole way of life. These hermits agreed to stay in their garden homes all the time, becoming a real-life part of the garden's design. They were looked after by their wealthy employers, and sometimes they even gave advice or entertained guests at fancy parties. It's quite strange to think about this today. On one side, you could say it was nice that these hermits had a place to live and regular meals, which many people back then didn't have. But on the other side, it's odd to think of a person's whole existence being reduced to a form of garden decoration. Imagine people at a dinner party being encouraged to check out the new addition to the garden, and it's actually a person, not a plant or a statue. This unusual practice started way back in the 15th century, inspired by notable individuals like François d'Assise, who chose to live a secluded life on his family's land before eventually becoming close to King Charles VII of France. The trend really picked up in England in the Georgian period. It was a time when people were really into the ideas of the Enlightenment, and having a hermit live on your land was seen as a way to show off your love for nature and a simpler life. The first official garden hermitage in England was set up by William Stukeley in 1727, and after that, it became quite the thing for rich landowners to have their very own hermit. Looking back, the idea of garden hermits shows us just how far people would go to live out their fantasies of the countryside. It turned the idealized vision of rural living into something you could actually see and touch, without having to give up the comfort of a wealthy lifestyle. But there's more to it than just the oddity. This trend also tells us a lot about the social structures back then. The fact that wealthy people could turn living people into part of their garden scenery really shows the stark differences between classes. It was a clear sign of how the rich viewed themselves as above others, to the point where they could literally make people part of their decorative plans. Discover how tough life was for people struggling to find a place to sleep in a world that was changing fast. Centuries ago, desperate nights in Victorian London. In a time when just booking a simple place to stay for the night can cost you around $150, and fancier spots, much more. The thought of getting somewhere to sleep for just 4 pennies seems like something out of a fairy tale. But if you take a closer look at what life was like in London in the 1800s, you'll see this was really the case. However, it wasn't as nice as it sounds. People weren't staying in cozy inns or nice little bed and breakfasts. Instead, they were spending the night in wooden boxes shaped like coffins, meant for those who had very little money. These weren't considered a luxury. Rather, they were a last option for people struggling to get by in London during a time of great change and promise. The city was filling up fast, driven by the hope of finding work and a better life that the Industrial Revolution offered. But what awaited many was a city struggling to keep up, with not enough places for everyone to live comfortably. As the 1800s went on, London was at the center of all this new industrial activity, attracting people from all over. But as more and more people arrived, the harder life got for those who didn't have much. London's housing couldn't keep up, leading to too many people living in cramped and dirty conditions. This is where the idea for the 4-penny coffin came in as a sad way to try to help. For the cost of 4 pennies, which was about what you'd pay for bread, those with very little money could have a spot in one of these coffin-shaped boxes for the night. These weren't like the fancy graves in a cemetery, but were simple wooden boxes where people could escape the cold. They were kept in big rooms lined up one after the other. Even though it sounds pretty sad, having one of these places to sleep was better than being out on the street. The places that had these coffins were usually run by groups trying to help the homeless. They didn't just offer a place to sleep, but also had a kitchen where people could make something to eat, and sometimes even offered a cup of tea or coffee in the morning. This might not seem like much, but for those living in poverty in London, it was something. On one side of the city, you had wealth and luxury, while on the other, many were facing extreme poverty. The 4-penny coffin shows just how big the gap was between different people living in the same city. These coffins were a creative but sad way to deal with not having enough housing. They show how desperate the situation was for shelter. They were also a way to try to manage the crisis caused by so many people moving to the city and the fast pace of new industries growing. The 4-penny coffin also tells us a lot about how people back then viewed poverty. While these places to sleep were meant to help, they also kind of suggested that being poor was someone's own fault. Calling these sleeping spots coffins makes it seem like there was no hope for those using them. Looking back at this part of history helps us understand how tough life was in cities like London in the 1800s. It's a reminder of how societies have tried to deal with basic needs like housing. It shows a time when the difference between the rich and the poor was very clear. And for some, finding a safe place to sleep was almost impossible. Looking back at an old-time selfie from the 1920s, you can't help but smile a bit. It shows that even back then, people liked to take pictures of themselves, though it wasn't as easy or as common as it is today. This old photo, taken in front of a mirror, shows that capturing your own image once involved a lot more planning and effort. It makes today's quick phone selfies seem really simple by comparison. Back then, cameras were not something you could just slip into your pocket. They were big, heavy, and pretty complicated. Plus, you had to be really careful with your film, because it cost a lot, and you couldn't just delete a photo if it didn't turn out well. This meant that taking a photo was a big deal. You had to really think about it and make sure everything was set up just right before you could take your shot. Nowadays, most people think selfies are a new trend that started with smartphones. But actually, the idea of taking a photo of yourself has been around for a long time. The first known selfie was taken way back in 1839 by a guy named Robert Cornelius. He set up his camera outside his family's store and had to stand super still for several minutes just to get one photo of himself. Think about that the next time you snap a quick selfie without a second thought. The story of Cornelius and his selfie is pretty incredible, especially when you think about how easy it is to take photos now. It reminds us that people have always found ways to capture their own images, even when it wasn't easy. Back in Cornelius's day, taking a selfie meant dealing with a big camera and making sure the lighting and focus were just right, all without any way to check how the photo turned out until much later. Cornelius's selfie wasn't just a fun thing he did on a whim. It was a big deal that took a lot of patience and planning. It's a stark contrast to how we can now take as many photos as we want, whenever we want, and see them right away. Since the time of that first selfie, photography has changed a lot. We've gone from needing big cameras and having to wait a long time to see our photos, to being able to take thousands of pictures on our phones and share them instantly. But even with all these changes, the basic idea of capturing a moment in time remains the same. Taking photos of ourselves used to be something only artists or photographers with lots of skills could do. But now, thanks to digital cameras and smartphones, anyone can take a selfie anytime. This has made photography something everyone can enjoy, not just the experts. Even though it's super easy to take selfies now, there's something really special about finding an old selfie, like the one from the 1920s. Those old photos seem more important somehow, like they're more meaningful than just another picture on a phone. They remind us of a time when taking a photo of yourself was a big event, not just something you did without thinking. Let's leave Earth for a bit to see an astronaut's amazing selfie with our planet in the background. Buzz Aldrin's historic shot. On the day we celebrate selfies, let's drift away from Earth for a bit and look at a fascinating fact. Buzz Aldrin, the astronaut, took what might be the coolest selfie ever, a picture with the whole Earth in the background. During the Gemini 12 mission in November 1966, which was basically practice for going to the moon, Aldrin, floating in space, thought it would be a good idea to take a selfie. And so, with the Earth showing up behind him, he snapped the picture. This was no ordinary selfie. Aldrin had to use a Hasselblad camera, which is way too fancy for just any selfie. This camera was big and had to be changed to work in space, which is nothing like taking pictures on Earth. Imagine trying to use this huge camera with space gloves on. Taking this picture was a huge task, probably one of the hardest selfies ever taken. Think about how funny this situation is. There's Aldrin in a spacecraft going around the Earth on a mission that's helping us get ready to walk on the moon. And in the middle of all this serious space work, he decides to take a selfie. It's like he's saying, "Look at me, just hanging out in space, no big deal." The Hasselblad camera, known for its amazing film quality, was not your everyday camera. It was specially made to handle the tough conditions of space. Normal cameras wouldn't work there. They could break in the cold, or the lens could fog up. But the Hasselblad was built to make sure we could see space as clearly as possible, without any issues. But this camera was about more than just taking good pictures. These space missions were about exploring places humans had never been before. The Hasselblad had an important job: to show everyone back on Earth what space was like. It was a way for us to see what the astronauts were seeing, far away from home. When Buzz Aldrin took his selfie in space, the Hasselblad showed its true colors. In the middle of doing important space experiments, Aldrin used the camera to take a picture of himself with space behind him. This wasn't just any picture. It was a powerful moment. It showed that even in space, humans like to remember where they've been and what they've done. Aldrin, in his spacesuit, with the Earth behind him, made taking pictures into something special. It was his way of saying, "I'm here, in space, and this is what I'm seeing." It was a reminder that behind the big space missions were real people, curious and brave enough to explore the unknown. Taking that selfie with the Hasselblad was a big deal. It showed two sides of space exploration: the huge, unknown space around us and the human spirit, always wanting to learn more, understand more, and share our stories. This act of taking a selfie in space connected the vast universe and our personal human experiences. It was a reminder that even in strange or new places, we still want to connect with others, share our stories, and remember our adventures. The Hasselblad was key to making this connection. It wasn't just a camera. It was a partner in the journey into space. It let astronauts like Aldrin capture and share what space was really like, in clear detail, something we couldn't have imagined before. So while the Hasselblad's technical side is impressive, its real impact is in how it helped us connect with the vastness of space. It let astronauts share their view of Earth from far away and reminded us all the amazing journey of exploration we're all on. Back in the 1950s, flying was a big deal. It wasn't just about getting from one place to another. It was a whole event. People dressed up like they were going to a fancy party, not squeezing into a plane. The inside of planes back then had tons of room, and everyone had enough space to stretch out their legs. It was like being in a big, fancy living room in the sky, not the tight seats we're used to now. The people working on the plane, called flight attendants now, but known as stewardesses back then, were super attentive. They made sure everyone was happy, serving fancy meals on real plates, even to the people paying the least for their tickets. But not many could actually afford to fly. Tickets cost a lot more than they do today, even when you think about how money was worth more back then. So, flying was something only a few people could do. But let's not get too carried away thinking those old planes were all great. Compared to the planes we have now, they were slow. It's funny to think about, but they were the slowpokes of the sky. Then, in the late 50s, things started to change big time. That's when jet engines came into the picture. Planes like the Boeing 707 and the Douglas DC-8 started flying, and they could go twice as fast, making the world feel a lot smaller. Suddenly, flying across the Atlantic didn't take days, it took hours. These new jets made flying a lot quicker and a lot more comfortable. It wasn't just about getting to your destination anymore, it was about getting there fast. And everyone started flying more because these planes could take a lot more people a lot farther, a lot faster. But with all these changes, flying lost a bit of its magic. The adventure of flying for a long time, going to far-off places, started to fade. Airports got busier, planes got fuller, and the whole flying experience changed. It wasn't just for adventurous travelers or the super rich anymore. Flying became something everyone did, which is great in many ways, but it also meant that flying became a bit less special. The thing is, those old planes and the whole fancy flying experience were part of a different time. They were amazing, sure, but the way we fly now is pretty incredible too. Thanks to all the advancements since then, more people can go more places more often. The Boeing 707 and the Douglas DC-8 changed flying forever, making it faster and bringing different parts of the world closer together. Join a historic meeting where famous scientists debated big ideas about the universe. A snapshot of quantum controversies. Take a moment to imagine a historic meeting, the best of the best at science, all captured in a single old-timey photo from 1927. This photo is more than just a group picture. It's a lineup of the biggest names in science from the early 20th century, including stars like Albert Einstein, Marie Curie, Niels Bohr, and Werner Heisenberg. These famous figures, now seen as legends, were all photographed together at the Solvay conferences. These events were where the brightest minds would gather to share ideas, debate, and sometimes disagree on the biggest questions about the universe. The fifth meeting of the Solvay conference, forever captured in this photo, is celebrated not just for bringing together these famous individuals, but for its discussion on the challenging and new quantum theory. This meeting wasn't just another scholarly gathering. It was like putting intellectual giants into battle, with Einstein and Bohr going head-to-head on the nature of reality itself. Einstein, always the skeptic, was not a fan of quantum mechanics and its randomness, famously saying that he didn't believe God played dice. Bohr, on the other hand, stood firm in defense of quantum theory with its odd but proven predictions. Now let's focus on this iconic 1927 Solvay conference photo. It's like the ultimate yearbook photo for the smartest people of the time. The photo shows 29 of the world's most brilliant minds, including an impressive 17 Nobel Prize winners. It captures a historic moment of intellectual achievement. Among this group of brilliant individuals, Marie Curie is particularly notable. She is the only woman in the photo, but she's not just there to complete the picture. She's recognized for her revolutionary work on radioactivity, a term she coined. Her discoveries were so significant that she was awarded the Nobel Prize twice. The conference was not an ordinary meeting. It was the 5th Solvay Conference, held in Brussels, Belgium. These conferences were unique because they focused on physics and chemistry, attracting the top scientists to discuss the big scientific questions of the time. The 1927 conference was especially known for its focus on quantum mechanics, which was a new and thrilling field of physics then. Marie Curie is celebrated for her groundbreaking work on radioactivity, a concept she introduced. She discovered two elements, polonium and radium. Her research set the foundation for future work in nuclear physics and cancer treatment. She was the first woman to receive a Nobel Prize and is still the only person to have won in two different scientific areas, physics and chemistry. But the photo is noteworthy for more than just Marie Curie's presence. It includes other iconic figures, such as Albert Einstein, famous for his theory of relativity, Niels Bohr, who contributed significantly to our understanding of atomic structure and quantum theory, and Werner Heisenberg, who introduced the principle of uncertainty. The photo also reflects the era. In the early 20th century, science was rapidly advancing our comprehension of the universe. These scholars were leading that charge. Despite their varied specializations and perspectives, they came together at the Solvay conference to exchange ideas and learn from one another. This photo also shows a time when scientists came together, united by their passion for discovery. Even though they didn't always agree, especially on topics like quantum mechanics, they respected one another's work, proving that science has the power to unite people in the quest to unlock the universe's secrets. Behind the impressive Solvay conferences was Ernest Solvay, a Belgian businessman who loved science. His financial support and passion made these important meetings happen, leaving a legacy that still influences today. These conferences keep happening, bringing together top scientists to tackle the big questions in physics and chemistry. However, we shouldn't just look up to this event and its photo without seeing its full context. As incredible as this meeting was, it also shows the limitations and biases of its time. The Solvay conferences mainly featured the privileged elite, mostly men from Europe. Marie Curie, being the only woman in the photo, shines a light not just on her outstanding achievements, but also on the gender inequality in science back then. The photo captures a moment of great intellectual achievement, but also the narrow views and biases of early 20th century science. It reminds us that the journey to knowledge was often restricted, leaving out many who could have contributed. While we admire these scientists for expanding human understanding of the universe, we must also remember the missing voices, the overlooked perspectives, and the contributions that were never asked for. The lively debates between Einstein and Bohr also show that scientific progress isn't always smooth. The Solvay conference wasn't just about friendly idea sharing, it included intense disagreements over how the universe works. These debates show that science, despite its search for objective truth, is influenced by human biases, egos, and misunderstandings. Jump into a story about how Victorians used special huts on wheels for privacy at the beach. Victorian innovation for seaside modesty. Picture walking on a beach back in the Victorian times and coming across something that would look pretty odd to us today: bathing machines. Yes, they're exactly as named, but not what you might be thinking. Picture wooden huts on wheels, something like a small shed, not the kind of machinery we're used to now. These were the solution back then to the shocking idea of men and women being in swimwear together by the sea. Back in the mid-1700s, the Victorians came up with these bathing machines. They were like portable dressing rooms, created to let people change into their bathing suits and get into the ocean without showing too much skin. This was their clever way of dealing with the very strict rules about how people should act in public. These machines were seen on beaches not just in Britain, but also in countries like France, Germany, the USA, and Mexico. They were for everyone, from your everyday person wanting a swim to Queen Victoria herself, all to keep modesty in check by the seaside. These bathing machines were quite basic, but did the job. Imagine a wooden box about as tall as a person and twice as long, with a sloped roof and doors at both ends. Inside, you'd find a bench and a place to keep your wet clothes. Some of these machines were pretty fancy, decked out with white paint, mirrors, and even little luxury items like soap and perfume. Using one was a whole process. You'd get in, change, and then the machine, sometimes pulled by horses, would take you right into the water. This way, you could get into the sea without anyone seeing you in your bathing suit. For those not too confident in the water, there were dippers to help you in and out safely. And when you were done, you'd signal to be pulled back to shore. But as times changed, and people became more relaxed about being seen in swimwear together, the the bathing machines started to disappear around the early 1900s. Some turned into fixed changing rooms on the beach or got a new life as quaint beach huts. Imagine walking onto a Victorian beach and seeing a big wooden box on wheels right there on the sand. You'd get inside, take off your everyday clothes, and put on a swimsuit that probably had more fabric than what we'd wear for a whole year today. Then, depending on how much money the area had, either horses or people would pull this big box into the water. That way, you could get into the sea without anyone seeing even a tiny bit of your legs. It seems really silly now, doesn't it? The whole setup wasn't just awkward. It showed how far people back then would go to stick to what was considered proper. Picture a beach filled with these big, clumsy boxes moving in and out of the water, all to make sure nobody saw anything they weren't supposed to see. And the swimsuits. They were so heavy and covered so much that swimming must have been more of a workout than fun, especially once they got wet and heavy. Nowadays, the thought of needing something like that just to go swimming seems not just unnecessary but kind of funny. It really shows how strict things were back in the Victorian times, with everyone worrying so much about staying modest and proper. The bathing machine is like a symbol of how obsessed that era was with keeping up appearances and making sure nobody did anything that could be seen as even slightly wrong. But at the same time, there's something kind of charming about how ridiculous it all was. These rolling huts remind us of a time when going for a swim was a big production, with all kinds of rules and steps to follow. Looking back at the bathing machine makes us realize how much more relaxed we are now about things like going to the beach. It's a piece of history from when people went to great lengths to keep up with social standards, and getting into the sea was something you had to do without anyone seeing. Were bathing machines a charming quirk of history or a symbol of oppressive social norms? Comment and subscribe for more thought-provoking content.